All right, for more on Weah, McKennie, and a few other topics from around European football, we're thrilled to welcome into the show Gab Marcotti. Gab, one, thanks for staying up late with us. Two, are you moving in on our turf? Because I've been listening to the Gab and Jules show, and the last few episodes, there's a lot of very Futbol Americas friendly topics being floated into their rundown. What's going on over there?
Well, in fact, Jules and I today, we talked about Mauricio Pochettino and the U.S. men's national team job. We talked about Diego Gomez leaving. What do you want me to say? It's international break over here. There's nothing going on.
All over our garden, Gab. All over our garden.
We're not the jealous type, at least that's what they would say about this show. All right, let's talk about Weston McKennie here. Gab, it's interesting when you talk about a situation at Juventus. It's been this awkward back and forth, not just this past summer, but the summer as well, where the club kind of makes it seem like they don't really want him. Then they do end up wanting him, do end up having a role for him, maybe can't get the sale that they want for him on the market. What do you think of the situation kind of long-term there for Weston McKennie? What do you think of him as a player, and what do you think he'll have a role? What kind of role do you think he'll have this season?
So I think, look, the reality of Juventus is that, they're cutting the wage bill. They're cutting back. They racked up, I think, in excess of $400 million worth of losses over 2 years. And they're basically saying, all right, no more. You saw Federico Chiesa leaving. You saw Adrian Rabiot leaving. These guys didn't have bad seasons. They're not bad players. It's just that, right now they need to cut back, and they want to cut back because they want to comply with the rules. And Weston McKennie is a guy who, they look at this and they say, dude, you're making too much money. And that's why they tried to move him in the summer to Aston Villa. Obviously, that didn't work out. They have talked about a new deal, but it's a kind of like those kinds of deals where you take a pay cut and then we'll give you a multi-year deal. And I think it's mostly also about preserving transfer value. If you look at who their central midfielders are, and McKennie's been used primarily in central midfield at Juve, even though obviously the system's going to be a little bit different this year, they're pretty stacked because they brought in Kefren Turam, they brought in Douglas Luiz, they have Nicolò Fagioli back from his suspension. He's an Italian international. Manuel Locatelli is also kind of in and around the Italy squad. And in attacking midfield, they brought in Teun Koopmeiners as well, who can also play deeper. So there's no real room for him. And I think that's just the reality of the situation. And I think he knows that. I think he's an intelligent kid. He understands the situation at the club. But also, rather than accept a destination which might not suit him, he said, all right, I'm going to stick it out at least till January. Maybe there's injuries. Maybe I'll work my way back in. Worst thing that happens, I'm a free agent in June, and I can go anywhere.
Gab, I'm curious. I got a few questions, but my first question is just pure curiosity. If you rate Weston McKennie, I'm very curious what you think of him as a footballer. And before you answer that, secondly, under Maxi Allegri, he had a career year, double-digit assists. He was one of the more reliable players for Juventus. I know that's Allegri. Under Motta, if he does play, where do you see him playing is my question. So those two questions.
So Motta likes to play with, sort of in terms of the width, it tends to come from obviously the fullbacks or the wingers. It's, you can call it 4-2-3-1 if you like. And McKennie's not going to play as a winger. And he's not really going to play as a fullback in a four. I mean, the kind of his back line's already attacking enough as it is. So it would have to be in central midfield where there is a ton of competition there. He did play a lot last season, but he also played a lot because Fagioli got suspended for 8 months, 9 months, whatever it was, because they had other injuries. And to be fair to him, he was always there and he was ready when he was called into action. Allegri played a different type of football, a more conservative type of football. I think it's something that McKennie could adapt to. And look, if he'd taken the pay cut, if he'd committed to, a 3-year deal, and it was a pretty serious pay cut that they were offering him, but, it is in exchange for more years. maybe he could have been a part of it. I can completely understand as a professional why you wouldn't want to do that. I think, I don't know that he's shown me enough to say, all right, I can be a starter and a contributor on a Champions League kind of, Elite Eight type team. I don't know that he's done that. He can be a contributor on a squad basis on that kind of team. Now, Juventus were not on that level last season, and he had injuries, and he took his chances when he was there. But I think he's not going to grow into that unless he takes a pay cut and the more years. That's certainly the messaging from Juve. And I can understand why he wouldn't want to take a pay cut when, he can be a free agent and pick his spots when his contract expires.
Gab, similar question for you on Tim Weah, as far as like whether you rate the player or not. And obviously he's injured now, but what kind of role do you think he'll have this season for Juventus?
So I think in terms of what they contribute to Juve and what they can contribute, I got McKennie well ahead of Weah. He's just a better rounded player in my view for what they want. I think with Tim Weah, they were very excited. They still struggled a little bit. He played a little bit of wing back. Motta does like to use sort of genuine wide players. Maybe that's going to suit him more. Certainly on paper, he's not going to be a starter this season. So he's going to have to, work his way in. Obviously, Juventus are in multiple competitions, so there will be opportunities. But what we've seen also from Motta in the first two games, he started this guy in Bangula from from Juve's B team, which I think few people other than hardcore Juve fans had ever heard of. So he's willing to open the door to these guys. They've brought in other wingers, obviously Federico Conceição, and also the guy I really like, Nico Gonzalez. So there's definitely going to be competition for places.
All right, let's move on to AC Milan, another team that has a couple of Americans in the mix, of course, with Yunus Musa and Christian Pulisic. Gab, not off to a great start so far this season. No wins in their first 3 games. What's gone wrong, and how confident are you that Milan can turn it around?
So I think the start to Milan season, I think, has been largely overshadowed by individual defensive errors. I mean, I think that's what really cost them dropping points in each of their games. And in the first 2 games, because we need to have scapegoats, as you probably know, they identified Rafael Leao and Theo Hernandez, who ironically happened to be, arguably Milan's 2 best players, along with the goalkeeper Mike Maignan. And so Fonseca, wanting to make a statement, dropped them for the 3rd game. There's a sense that Theo Hernandez isn't necessarily as disciplined enough defensively, and Rafael Leao obviously kind of tends to flutter in and out of games. He's not consistent. I mean, when he's on, he's unplayable, but he's got those moments. And I think that's kind of overshadowed everything. Now, in their last game against Lazio, they came on when Milan were 2-1 down, immediately combined with another sub, Tammy Abraham, to score the equalizer. Everything's good. And then, boom, there's a cooling break. And the 2 of them, and I'd love to get Herc's view on this, right? And cooling breaks, everybody gets together, they drink water, they listen to instructions from the coaches. It's kind of like a timeout, right? These 2 guys, they stand at the other side of the pitch and kind of watch what's happening. Now, Theo Hernandez explained afterwards, well, we didn't need the cooling break. We'd only come on like 2 minutes before. I'm like, that's great. But think of the look that you're giving. It's not a good look, especially with all the crap that's happened before, when you guys hang out by yourselves and everybody else is with the coach and listening to what he has to say. So Milan are downplaying it. I think that's overshadowed a lot of the start of the season for Fonseca. Some of his new signings haven't bedded in yet. I like what they've done in the transfer window, and I'm a big Fonseca fan. I think they can have a good season. And I think, Christian Pulisic, because I know you're going to be going with Pulisic. You're going to be asking about him in a minute. I think he can be a part of it. I think he had a great season last year playing on the right. This season, the idea was to use him through the middle in kind of that number 10 role a little more. We'll see how that works out. I think Milan are going to be fine as long as there are no scars left from this Leao Theo Hernandez situation.
As far as Leao Theo Hernandez, I think you're right on that vein right there. You don't go and send another message after the coach already sends a message. That's intentional. They're doing something. They're sending their own message. Listen, Fonseca, you're saying is going to be fine. They didn't bring Fonseca in to be fine. They were 19 points off of Inter, who won the league. So they want Milan to be more than fine. They want them to be a title contender. I'm not trying to be biased here, but one of the best players on Milan last season, whether it was on the right, his new position, or on the left when Leao wasn't playing, or in the center as a 10, was Christian Pulisic. 15 goals, 11 assists, Gab. What are the expectations for Pulisic now, this year at Milan? And do you think he can surpass his first year in terms of his output, goals and assists?
I think, that's the goal, no doubt, he's setting for himself. Look, everybody likes Pulisic in Milan because he's been an absolute professional. He's worked really, really hard. Obviously, he plays on the right. I'm sure he'd rather play on the left, but obviously Leao's there. It's not a coincidence that Fonseca said, all right, I want to try you in that kind of number 10 position, advanced midfield. That's how much I trust you. They want to play high energy football. He can totally do that while also, keeping the quality as well, right? So I think he's primed for a big season. Now, obviously, he's got to stay healthy, and obviously the players around him have to do their jobs as well, starting with Rafael Leao, because he's the real value add to this team. And also, they got a new center forward in Alvaro Morata. Again, guy who's had ups and downs, but he obviously has all the tools to be really, really good, and coming off the experience with Spain at the Euros.
Gab, before we let you go, since you are in London there, I do want to bring up Mauricio Pochettino, because I was listening to the Gab and Jules show, and it was not only on the show, Herc, you'll be glad to know, it led the show, all right? It was at the very top of the rundown, talking Pochettino to the U.S. men's national team. But of course, Gab lives not far from Stamford Bridge, so he's seen Pochettino up close and personal. He's kind of seen the work that he did there at Chelsea. Obviously knows all that Pochettino has done over the years, not just in the Premier League, but beyond. Gab, just first off, what was your initial reaction to the early reports, which soon will be confirmed, that U.S. Soccer landed Mauricio Pochettino? I feel like on this side of the pond, when the name started to come out, like Jurgen Klopp early on, from the other side of the pond, you guys must have been thinking, boy, these Americans, they think they're going to land anybody. The job's not that attractive. I think it's pretty impressive that a guy like Mauricio Pochettino took the job. Are you surprised? Are you shocked that he took the U.S. job?
Well, this is one of the issues that we talked about on the show with Jules, is there seems to be a trend among a lot of the top clubs in Europe that almost a trend against like sort of the veteran, experienced coach who's been around, who's managed a lot of top clubs. You're seeing it. Who do Bayern hire? Vincent Kompany. Who did Chelsea replace Pochettino with? Enzo Maresca, who comes from Leicester. I think that is definitely the trend around Europe, and I think Pochettino kind of got stuck a little bit like that. I think he would have liked to throw his hat in the ring for the Manchester United job. He would have liked to have been considered as a successor to Carlo Ancelotti at Real Madrid. And I think the reasons why clubs aren't going for these older, more established managers is they're more expensive and they're less pliable. And this has been one of the knocks on Pochettino in the past, is that he can be stubborn. When he gets a little bit of success, after a while, the club are like, oh, look, we have a director of football recruitment. He's like, no, I don't like that player. I don't want that other player. That's been the accusation, and that's been part of the reason why he's no longer the Chelsea manager. That's been part of the reason why Paris Saint-Germain let him go. I don't know to what degree these are accurate. I think they generally are. But clubs just want to be more conservative. They want guys who are cheaper, who are not going to make the same level of demands. I think the era of kind of the folk hero genius coach, unless it's Jurgen Klopp or Pep Guardiola, I think that's pretty much over. But I also think, and this is maybe part of the reason why he was passed over for a top job. And by the way, it's not just him. I mean, where's Jose Mourinho coaching? He's in Turkey now, right? Who do Juventus go for? Thiago Motta. All that said, I think for a national team, I think Pochettino's an outstanding choice because he really has a level of warmth and charisma, which ties together with a ton of tactical knowledge. He can be a little bit manipulative of players, but I think most coaches, indeed most bosses in any walk of life, are a little bit like that. He's very big on the fitness, physicality, married to the tactical nous, and I think that probably suits the U.S. national team well. I think the fact that he's genuinely bilingual will also no doubt help when you're coaching the U.S. But it's an attractive job. I mean, you're coaching the host nation of the World Cup. If there's one tiny thing that makes me a little bit uneasy, and I haven't done any reporting on this whatsoever, a month ago, Jeff Carlisle told us, yeah, it's confirmed. It's Mauricio Pochettino. A month goes by, and we still don't have any announcement or confirmation. And I know it's lawyers and agents, last-minute things, but I'm just wondering, and I want to chuck this back to you guys. Did the U.S. Soccer Federation maybe screw this one up a tiny bit by telling everybody that it was all done when in fact it's not done? And does this not give Pochettino a whole bunch of leverage now at this stage about how stupid you're going to look if you screw this up? And maybe I want to bring another 3 assistants, and maybe I want this and that.
Go one further, Gab. Not Pochettino. What about Chelsea? Chelsea now have leverage, and they could use the money. This gives Chelsea and listen, I don't know what that relationship is like with the U.S. Soccer Federation and Chelsea after Emma Hayes. I can imagine they weren't too pleased that they lost her that way. They made her the highest paid coach in the women's game. So I'm sure there's much more at play here, but it's not just Pochettino who's going to have this leverage. Listen, you mentioned he's stubborn, off the field. You mentioned all the things he could be good at for the U.S. men's national team. You were there. You saw him very close when he was at Chelsea. If you had any doubts about him tactically in this new age football, this world of football where international football is so pragmatic, it is so just different from the club game. What are those doubts that you would have about Pochettino and the U.S. men's national team?
So that's a great question. I mean,
thank you.
I didn't just see him here. I saw him way back when he was at Southampton, and then all through those tremendous teams that he built at Spurs. He was, and look, Carlo Ancelotti's made the same journey. He was a guy who really had a strong idea, a strong tactical idea, and then realized that he needed to be more pragmatic. He needed to kind of mold what he wanted to do to the players at his disposal. And it's not always an easy idea, right? Because you're putting your idea of football, you're putting your idea of what works, and you're putting it to one side and catering to the individual and the individual tendencies of the players. And it's a good thing to do to some degree, but then you also got other aspects, like the fact that you're coaching these guys. Do I try to get him what I want him to do, or do I leave him to do what comes naturally to him, even though it doesn't suit the system and the whole? It's not easy. It's not that simple. I think at Chelsea, I always said if I had to grade Pochettino's season at Chelsea, I would give him an incomplete because they had so many injuries and because it was such a zoo. By the end of the season, Chelsea moved back up the table. They didn't always play well, but then they just had so many guys who were hurt, so many important players who were hurt for so much of the season, that I just find it really, really difficult to judge. Cole Palmer, who kind of fell out of nowhere into the team, he kind of really, really carried them through long stretches of the season. And, that's not Pochettino. That's just, kind of unearthing Cole Palmer. So it's a tough one to answer. I think he has become much, much more pragmatic. The other aspect is Pochettino. One of the knocks against him is Pochettino has this very tight-knit group of assistants, and I'm assuming most of them are going to follow him to the U.S. because these people follow him pretty much everywhere. And I remember somebody who worked at Spurs when he was there talked about how, you know, he walked into into the coach's room, and one of his assistant coaches, I made some sort of joke about the weather, and it was like, ha ha, like nobody laughs, right? And then like 5 minutes later, Pochettino walks in and he makes the exact same joke about the weather. And everybody's laughing and guffawing like it's the funniest thing in the world, right? And he said he cultivates that. Like these guys, like, oh, the boss said it. Oh, it's the smartest thing in the world. And then, you know, Herc says it and like, whatever, right? Again, it's an internal dynamic, right? You want the unity, you want the guys who are loyal, but then equally, some people want to have a number 2 or number 3 in their squad who says, hey, I disagree with you, this is why, and then they figure it out. The knock on Pochettino has been that, no, this is my way, these guys are loyal to me, I don't want to hear dissenting voices, even kind of, you know, within the dressing room from my staff. And then he goes too far in that direction. That's been the knock on him in the past. Again, I really think this is a great appointment for the U.S., but I think he's aware that this is part of the rep that he has, and it's something that I would assume, you know, Crocker, who's known him forever, also knows and would have taken into account.